Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. The E in the nest is for exercise. And for most of us, we understand that in order for us to achieve our optimal health, we need to exercise sometime. You've also heard from this podcast that exercise is primarily a weight loss maintenance tool. We've heard this message from my previous guest, Vinnie Tortorich, and even authors like Gary Taubes of Good Calories, Bad Calories. Today, I want to explore exercise a little further with an expert for who nearly 50 years has been on the forefront of health and wellness. Today's guest is Dr. Ben Bocchicchio. And Dr. Ben introduced his approach to exercise in 1974, where his focus was on slow resistance training done in a way that is safe and available to all populations. And that's really important to me because that includes those with limited resources, the elderly, and those suffering from chronic medical conditions. In fact, his approach is so safe that he was the first practitioner to introduce resistance training to phase 2 cardiac rehab in 1982, which is now an accepted protocol. He pioneered high-intensity exercise for high-endurance athletes in the mid-1980s. And lastly, he introduced his high-intensity exercise for weight loss, which is, in my heart, and programs that include the OptiFast protocol, which is actually the first popular bariatric physician's program called OptiFit. Furthermore, Dr. Ben has published more than 200 articles and study reports in the fields of fitness, health, and exercise, and his work includes the acclaimed book, 15 Minutes to Fitness, and the sale of more than 300,000 DVDs, S.Ma.R.T DVDs, that's an acronym in 31 countries that speaks to his approach. He is continuing to work as an investigator and consultant to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, ASU, and a number of academic and corporate health institutions. And with that, it is my pleasure, Dr. Ben, to welcome you to Protecting Your Nest.
I'm glad to be here, Tone.
Well, I'm glad you're here. And this episode is important to me because so many people struggle to find time to exercise, But as your book title would suggest, and I have it in my hands actually, 15 minutes, twice weekly is all the time commitment we need. Imagine only 15 minutes twice a week. When I first learned that, I was like, that can't be true. So, but I learned about you when I saw this image of Doug Reynolds of Low Carb USA. And he was working out with you, and I saw a lot of muscles coming from his chest. I was intrigued, and I was also privileged recently to make 2 videos with Pam Devine, his partner, and we walked through the Low Carb USA website and the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners website, and I just wanted to make sure people knew about those great resources. So, I thought to myself, I have the book, so why not open the book up and maybe walk through a few of the chapters in your book? So, but before we get started, I want to dive a little bit into how your family has influenced you to become the man you've become. So talk a little bit about your early years and how you've been influenced by your family.
Well, that's an interesting question, Tony, because I think I was influenced to go exactly where I got to from family connections. My uncle, Felix Bocchicchio, was the trainer and manager of a world heavyweight champion that most people don't remember called Jersey Joe Walcott. That was in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s. So I saw him, and he was a trainer. I mean, so we used to get to Madison Square Garden and the Armory and see. I would sit in the second, third row. I'm talking 5, 6, 8 years old and watch these guys. And then I would go and they check out the boxers. They had boxing gyms, and they had, punching bags and heavy bags and all kinds of stuff you don't even see anymore, although they had kettlebells for real. I mean, real kettlebells back then. And I got exposed to that. I had another uncle, my Uncle Tony, who was a biochemist who worked with Jonas Salk on the polio vaccine. Okay. But he was what they called in those days, Tony, in the 30s and 40s, a physical culturist. What that meant, he was a guy who lifted weights and exercised and took vitamins. Okay. And he had a training partner and this goes back, some of the older people will know, the youngers won't. He had a training partner called Angelo Siciliano. Now, the world knew Angelo Siciliano as Charles Atlas. He was
Mm,
the first guy on the back of the magazine. He was a 90-pound weakling, and they kicked sand in his face, and then he developed this system. He was the first guy to actually sell an exercise system popularly in the United States and around the world. So I had that kind of background. And my dad, who was a captain in the Army and a fire captain, when he took the test for the fire department, had a set of weights, and that set of weights were belonged to my uncle Tony and Charles Atlas, and I still have some of those weights. So I was fascinated with this stuff. And then I was, not that the older I get, the better I was kind of a deal, but I was a pretty high level performing athlete, and I was
mm-hmm,
fascinated with the training, the exercise, the discipline. Muhammad Ali was one of my idols, and I remember I used to run at night with combat boots on because that's the way Ali did it, and so I was fascinated. I read everything even before, and when I went to school, I studied health, physical education, science, master's degree with emphasis in kinesiology, PhD in exercise phys, another PhD in health, postdoctoral work at Columbia in uh, weight management and body composition. So I've been doing this and learning this, and I'll tell you the truth. I've been out of school for a long time, but I probably have learned more in the last 5 years just from the availability of information than I did even then. But so to me, it was, it wasn't work. It wasn't studying. It was something I was motivated to do because I really enjoyed it. And then I wanted to do this for my living. And I got very lucky in the fact that I made a very good living. To me, I almost feel like I stole an apple because I made a lot of money doing what I would do anyway, kind of, having this fitness studios and talking about this stuff. And, for me, people paying me money, Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, to listen to what I have to say, to me is like ridiculous. It's like a fantasy. So that's how I arrived at where I am, kind of, and that's how my family influenced me. I think it definitely
yeah.
had something to do with where I'm at.
Well, the apple didn't fall too far. Speaking of apples, you didn't fall too far from the tree. I mean, you had a whole lot of folk who just put you in an environment where physical activity, physical health was just what you became accustomed to. So, and then
Yeah,
of course, you had a little bit more of a passion for it than the average Joe. So I appreciate that. And I love hearing that backdrop. And I'm going to grab the book, and I looked at the cover, and I see a very attractive couple there. So I
yeah.
just wanted to get some insights as to choosing this cover, this photo, and what this photo represents for you.
Okay, not a very romantic story, but when you write a book, you have publishers, right? Now, if the publishers, and they did give me a nice advance, okay, and I have to say, listen, you guys must know more about publishing than I do because I
That's
don't
right.
know anything about it. Okay, I just write the book. So they sent me different pictures of different couples because they wanted this to be for men and women. They wanted it to be about health and exercise, diet and exercise, and those are the models that look to me the most normal. They had some really buffed people, and they had some other ones. So that's the one that I kind of selected of the 4 or 5. So I have no idea how some people think that's me. Although, if you want to hear an interesting story about that, on the back of the cover of that book, the publishers asked me, "Do you have any before and after pictures?" And I've worked with superstar models and movie stars, and I don't give out names. Okay, so as a joke, Tony, I said I sent them 2 pictures. The one
Yep.
on the left, I was 25 years old, and the one on the right, I was 65 years old. So I
Oh,
said,
wow.
here's my before and after. I said, this is before I got old, and this is after I got old. And I sent them,
Okay.
and they used it on the cover. I had, honest to God, sent it as a lark. All right. And I said, oh my God, they put it on the back cover of the book.
Wow. And that's amazing. Well, it's an impressive picture. And I think, again, we let the professionals do their work and make so that's why we pay them to, or, have a
Yeah,
relationship
no,
with
that's
them.
why they pay us.
Well, there you go. That's right. And I'll take that, right? And I also see, if you look at the cover, at the very top, it has Charles Barkley
Yeah.
on there, and when I opened it, so I went to the back, or I think it's on the inside. I looked and saw what Charles had written, and what he said was, I have met and worked with hundreds of trainers and exercise people in my lifetime, but Dr. Ben stands out as one of the true experts in the field. He has worked with world-class athletes and everyday folk of all ages with uncanny success for more than 40 years at the time when he wrote that. So I'm curious, share the story of how you met Sir Charles.
Okay. My wife and I had a niece down when I moved to Scottsdale, to Arizona, who was a young girl. Okay, she was maybe 5 or 6 at the time, and so we would take her friends and her to the movies or to the state fair. Take the kids around and whatever. You know, because they were fun kids. One of the kids was Christiana Barkley. Okay, so Christiana now is in her 30s. To this day, calls me Uncle Benny because she knew me when she was 5 or 7 or whatever. So we take the kids around, and then Mo, Charles's wife Mo, who's a real character. I mean, he's one of my. I love her to death. Um, was told by a doctor to come see me for exercise. Believe it or not. So I got to be real friendly and started training Mo. Uh, and then we got friendly, and then I met Charles through that, and we got friendly enough where we spent a lot of New Year's and Thanksgivings together, family gatherings and stuff like that. Went out to eat and that kind of stuff. So we became really good friends, and he would Charles, and he would bust my chops about being short because he's like, and I would bust his chops about being fat. So but that's how it goes with Charles. I'll tell you a cute story. So he helped me. We did some stuff with inner city schools, and I donated equipment, gave some talks, and I took him with me. Right? He's very cool like that. So we're driving in his Range Rover. He always wants to drive because he has, a big car because he needs a big car. He doesn't fit in a regular car. So we're driving into this school, right? And it's an inner city school, and a bunch of kids of color are at the fence and they're waving and stuff. And he says to bust my chops, he goes, "Hey, look." He says, "Look, Ben." He says, "All the kids are waiting for you to come here." So I gave it back to him. I said, "Yeah, you know what?" And they're really happy because I got a big brown chauffeur driving me around, Charlie. I said, so, don't get on my nerves, buddy. So anyway, we bust. He's a very, very nice man. We go out to dinner, Tony, and if a kid comes over in the middle of dinner or anything, he'll take a picture, he'll shake their hand.
Yeah.
Sometimes if an adult comes over, he'll say, "Can you wait till after dinner or something?" But he's just a naturally affable, nice man. Okay,
Yeah. And that's
and
good to
he's
hear.
fun.
And that's kind of what you would assume, but it's nice
Yeah.
to get confirmation that he is what we think he is.
Yeah, he
And
takes care of the waiters. He takes care of the guys that
yeah,
the valets. He's good, and
that's
he's done a
good,
lot
just
of. I
good
can say
people.
personally, I know he's donated millions of dollars to causes without any kind of publicity. No, he's a good, real good man, and I like him a lot. He's a good guy.
Well, that's wonderful, and definitely, I remember back in the day when he said he wasn't a role model. I said, "Yes, you are. You're one," and I really appreciate all he's achieved and done. And I'm kind of thumbing through your book, and in your introduction, you introduced that smarter system, and I know we're gonna have a separate video that talks about it that we're gonna have on YouTube. But for the podcast audience who may or may not see that video, and I love acronyms. That's why I have a nest and a rope. So I appreciate the acronym, by the way. And so I just want to make sure we talk a little bit about that because that's the foundation. So let's kind of review that for the podcast audience. If you can just talk a little bit about what
Yeah.
the SMART acronym means
Well, the
and
SMART acronym is just something I made up to kind of describe simply what the basis of this method that I use and basically designed is. So S is slow because all the movements that we do, this is resistance training, meaning we work against some kind of resistance, bands or weights, or sometimes body weight, but or a total gym or a Bowflex or whatever, dumbbells. So the movements are slow for two reasons: one, to maintain load or tension on the muscle, and two, to reduce enormously the amount of force or damaging movement that can be uh, witnessed by most people who do conventional high intensity exercise. So I took out all of the momentum, the acceleration, and made it as slow as possible. So it's slow. The M is for maximum, and it's maximum response, because in my 50 years of doing this, I never met one person who didn't want the biggest bang for their buck, for their time and effort, the biggest response for their time and effort in exercise. So this is what I try to accomplish. And T is for training, which training means this is an ongoing routine. This is something that you work into your schedule, and it's something that you want to do for the rest of your life. And one of my Dr. Benisms, people say, Dr. Ben, how long do I have to exercise? Till what age? And I say, I would recommend that you exercise until 2 days after you're dead, just to make sure you're dead. Okay. So, so it's a lifelong process. Okay.
Yeah, I believe that, and it actually reminds me of my I had an old Jaguar for 20 years. When I buy a car, I hold on to it, and I was sad to see it go. It just couldn't handle it. And so, but then, I became a parent, and I started driving the minivan. So the Jaguar sat in the garage, and then when I started driving it again, it was making funny sounds. So I took it to the mechanic, and the mechanic said, "Listen, cars were meant to be driven, right?" And I learned that that's also true for the human body. So talk a little bit about, because in chapter 1 you talk a little bit about how the body needs exercise, right? So share with my audience why you think that's true.
Okay. Again, as we developed as a species, okay, certain characteristics, certain physiology or chemistry, certain anatomy, the way our bones and are structured, the way we move, okay, developed, and this is what helped propagate and maintain the survival of the species. Primarily, okay, muscle activity, muscle stimulation, or exercise, or activity, or movement determined the supporting systems, which we hold almost in adulation. The cardiovascular system. Oh, the cardiovascular system is simply a support system of the instigation of muscle work. We wouldn't have to deliver blood at 6, 7, 8 times resting rate, okay, and clear byproducts of this activity if it wasn't for the muscles being taxed. But so the cardiovascular system, the heart, and that whole pumping system developed as a result of muscle stimulation. The respiratory system, why do we breathe? Why do we breathe heavily? Why can we breathe? Why can we exchange oxygen at 10, 15 times resting rate? Well, if it wasn't for muscle action, we wouldn't need to. If we were sedentary, if we just hung out, okay, that sedentary aspect of our development as a species led to death. If we were sedentary, we could not get away from predators. We couldn't get to food and water and shelter. We would have died. Now, sedentary behavior is actually very common, and we don't die initially from it because we can get to food and there aren't predators roaming the streets, at least in a lot of neighborhoods. And
Right.
and so but it does take a long time. That's why we have degenerative diseases, and sedentary behavior, not moving, is one of the features. Is that one of the main features? So that's basically what I wanted to do, is to develop a system that capitalized on the importance of the muscle system, produced as many of the benefits as we could in the shortest, safest, applicable amount of time, which is 15 minutes twice a week. And it really is almost a universal application. I have very few people that don't benefit most productively and most efficiently from that twice a week, with a couple of days in between for about 15 minutes, working all the major muscle groups. So that's how I developed the system to be practical and effective. And I've been pretty fortunate over the years and have tens, probably hundreds of thousands of people that have successfully utilized it to be metabolically more healthy, more vigorous, obviously reduce body fat. So I'm a body composition guy, Tony. I really started in business as a body composition guy. How do I lose fat? How do I look a little better? How do I get a little more energy? I mean, and to me, grossly, body composition very highly correlates to metabolic health. So what we're trying to do in most cases, except for people that are too thin, but in most cases, we're trying to reduce body fat because we store too much energy, and the toxicity of that condition is what causes a lot of our problems, insulin resistance being maybe the primary root.
Yeah.
And in the development of muscle, or the stimulation to develop muscle or to strengthen muscle. There are so many myriad benefits to our metabolic and psychological health. An interesting, I think, an interesting statistic. Ruiz and Blair in 2008 British Medical Journal, 12,000 people studied the single most correlative factor to aging, okay, to growing older, is muscle strength, not blood sugar, not smoking, not obesity,
Wow.
muscle strength. If you're in the top third for your age and gender in muscle strength, you are 40% more likely to live to be 100 and 35% less likely to die of cancer as a single variant. Okay, I mean, it is very important.
And I know that whenever I do my wellness visits for my, seniors,
Hmm.
65 and up, we always talk about, making sure your muscles that you're exercising, that your quads are strong. So when you stand,
Exactly.
and just the idea of falling and breaking a hip, you don't want to do that. And if your muscles are strong, that's going to probably not happen. But then you add all these other metabolic processes that require muscle. And I just can't imagine a person being healthy. Think about all those people we send to the hospital and they have to have rehab just after being in the hospital for a week or two.
Yeah,
They have to
yeah,
have
yeah.
rehab. So
There's no
it's just
reserve there, Tone. There's no, in other words, part of what we're trying to do when we become fit, okay? So it's nice to be fit and it looks good and all that stuff, but it allows us this cushion so in case there's an imposition or a pathogen or a problem, we have some reserve. Why do you think people that get cancer die less often, less frequently if they're strong? Because there's some
right.
reserve. They're not
That's right.
wasting away instantly. There's a cushion there. I mean, that's about as simply as I can explain it. And that's what you want. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be like ultra fit, Olympic athlete. That at some point, being really super fit or the ability to demonstrate fitness like an athlete or something bifurcates or it goes away from the health uh,
Right.
objective. But
That's
being
right.
fit is really, really important. I mean, and it's just, I think that's why hardwired into our DNA. When we see somebody fit in what we call, in shape, lean and muscular, there's a natural attraction or proclivity to say, that's pretty cool. Just, I think it's a normal response, right? And I think that again is hardwired into our DNA, probably helped us procreate and develop, some selective breeding, to the people that were more likely to survive than not.
Well, even how we travel and enjoy life. I literally, on my way home from clinic and preparing to talk to you, I talked to a family, and although she did have dementia, she fell. And you know what she was doing before she fell? She was running after her great grandbaby. See what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I want to live in a world where my older patient can run after her grandbaby without fear of falling.
yeah. And
And if she
when she does fall, does she have the resilience and the muscular integrity so that something doesn't become catastrophically damaged?
exactly, and there were two things broken from her fall, and so again, it's one of those things you can easily overlook, but it does make sense to make sure you have muscle mass. And you also mentioned fat. And when I wrote my book, Fix Your Diet, Fix Your Diabetes, and I learned a little bit about fat and the fear of fat. So I had a whole chapter, Fix Your Fear of Fat. And you similarly talk about fat in chapter 2 of your book. So do me a favor, share some of the reasons why we should stop fearing fat in our diet, because a lot of people still fear fat.
Well, I heard somebody say once, too bad the word fat means you're overweight and that it also applies to one of the food types, one of the
Right,
macronutrients. It's
right,
a shame that
right.
they're the same word, but the accumulation of fat. Okay, there's communication, there's signaling going on, like we had mentioned in the body constantly. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of things going on right now as we sit and speak. Okay, a lot of the things that go on is what we call crosstalk between fat cells and muscle cells, and the brain and the fat cells and the digestive system. I mean, crosstalk means signals, okay? Now, fat in a natural, healthy state is a place where we reserve energy, okay? And we reserve enough energy to last us days, if not weeks, okay? In a healthy state, meaning those fat cells send the right signals, talk the right way to muscles in the brain and our endocrine system, hormones. That's cool. But what's happening now, more prevalently and much more prevalently and catastrophically, honestly, is that we are overwhelming the ability of our storage of our fat cells to handle that capacity, okay, that we're demanding of it. So what happens, okay? And whether it's carbohydrate or it's fat, we've got too much fuel in our body. We don't need that much fuel. So when these fat cells become kind of bursting, if we will, okay, they send some weird signals. They start to cause what we call inflammation, which is inflammation in this sense is a bad thing, okay, because it constantly degenerates processes and signaling. Okay, so we basically, bottom line, we become ill, we become resistant to taking in more energy. Insulin, which drives sugar into our muscles and in some organs, okay, now becomes rejected. We don't handle it. So now we've got all this chemical disarray. And basically, most people think, well, if I cut down on fats, don't forget the big experiment in the 1970s. I tell people there's a correlation between nutritional and exercise and activity history. Okay. Everybody thought when Eisenhower had his heart attack, he would eat, lettuce, and they found cholesterol. They discovered how to test for cholesterol, and cholesterol looked fatty, even though it's not technically a fat. They said, ooh, there's fat in the arteries. Okay. So fat is now demonized. You know the whole story. The most people would know the story of Ansel Keys. He was on 1960 cover of January cover of Time magazine because he said, if we can conquer cholesterol, it means we're going to reduce fat and saturated fat in our blood. Saturated fat is what? It's fatty foods. It's meat. These things are all terrible. So they demonize fat. So what do we do? We need energy, okay? There's two sources of energy primarily, fat and sugar, okay? So now we switched over. Anything that wasn't fat was good. So sugar in any form, you could inject glucose into your veins for some of those people. They thought, oh, that's great. It's just not fat. But what happens to sugar when we overload sugar? It turns into fat. So basically, if you're eating a high sugar diet, you're eating the worst combination possible, high sugar and high fat. I mean, this is how you blow up fat cells. This is how you become diabetic. This is how you become insulin resistant. So, but eating fat in and of itself does not make you fat. In fact, fat has some really good properties. Fat gives us satiety. It fills us up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Fat takes a longer time to digest. Okay, fat has a good place. We can store 30 days worth of fat energy in our bodies. We can only store 1 day's worth of sugar energy, okay, in our body. So what do you think was the preferred storage unit, okay? What food was for the species? Fat, because if we didn't have energy, okay, we'd have 30 days of this reserve. So it stands to some logic reason, I think, that we would assume that fat could not be, since energy is turned into fat in any case, fat itself cannot be, demonized. Okay. So, and again, it's very hard to tell people that you can eat. Now, and again, some people take this to the ridiculous extent. I mean, I'm not saying drink oil. I'm not saying put butter on every possible thing you can possibly take, because let's face it, if you're over fat and you eat fat, your body's going to burn that fat before it goes into your stored fat.
That's right.
So if you're trying to lose the fat, you want to be moderate, but you can't be afraid of fat. I know some women to this day, Tony, that grew up in the 70s that think fat makes them nauseous. They look at it, oh, I can't eat that has fat, and I say, it's not biologically, it's not chemically accurate. Okay. The sugar really is the most damaging, because not only is it a high energy source that burns very quickly and then requires more to replenish it, but it also is addictive, meaning that it triggers what we call the opiate receptors. It gives you pleasure. So, for example, you could eat a big meal and be perfectly sated, a nice balance, what we call a balanced meal, some fats and protein, maybe a little bit of carbs, okay, and be sated, be full. Somebody brings out some high sugar dessert, you're not hungry at all. You'll gobble that friggin' thing down, not because you need the energy,
Mm-hmm.
but because your brain says, whoa, this is too good to pass up. Okay. So it has those
That's right.
implications, both chemically, both metabolically, and also behaviorally. So, but fat does not, no, people aren't really addicted to fat. They're usually addicted to processed sugars and starches, which is the same thing.
Yeah, and I think the message I share with my patients constantly is yes, it's low carb, high fat, but it's really low carb. I mean, if you just
Yeah.
reduce your carbs, your body will liberate the fat and use it for fuel, so you don't have to add all this extra fat.
Right.
And but if you do eat fat, don't worry about it. It's okay to eat the fat off the steak. You don't have to like,
Right.
get
Trim it.
overly concerned,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Another
I hear
thing I
you.
like about fat, you said all these good things about fat. The one I like about fat is taste, right? So now I can eat some food that's got some flavor because when I have food that's fattier, that's why I like ribeye steaks.
Yeah.
I they just taste nicer. That's why I like lamb because it's got some fat on it. So we can get into the weeds and talk about grass fed and pasture
Yeah.
raised and
Yeah.
all of those
Yeah.
things. But at the end of the day, if you reduce the carbs, you're probably going to do better. So let me look at your book a little bit again. I went to page 42, and it has a section entitled, why diet alone isn't sufficient, and that speaks to my heart because I have a nest and rope acronym. I could have been just focusing on low carb, but my protecting your nest and my rope are all working together to kind of help people understand. And as I look at this, it says, exercise can and diet can't. And you have a few things you mentioned, like, increase your metabolism, increase cardiovascular function, acutely change brain chemistry, and magnify fat release. So I just want you to just take a moment and just comment on why diet alone isn't sufficient, and some of the benefits of some additional benefits of exercise.
Yeah. Well, I think it's pretty obvious to me that this is a synergistic kind of a relationship, meaning these things work together. Picture the fat in your body as a candle with a wick on either side. So if we just diet, we're burning that fat on one side. If we diet and exercise, we're burning it from both sides. Okay, that's a real simplistic analogy, but I think and with, for example, people diet, okay, and I've been involved with this from OptiFast, which was in the 70s, and the bariatric surgeons and the endocrinologists got me involved in this thing. And for example, you can diet, okay, you can restrict calories and lose weight, okay, but the absence of caloric input, the absence of fuel, or the reduction in fuel usually manifests itself in the equal loss of lean mass and fat mass. Okay, so unless you are enormously morbidly obese, which some people are, okay, losing weight is obviously a good thing. But if you're at some point, not at a very advanced point, if you start to lose as much lean tissue as you do fat tissue, it now becomes harder and harder and harder, requiring less and less energy to sustain weight loss, and certainly even to sustain or to maintain weight loss. So my second doctorate, I did a simple clinical trial where I took long-term weight loss patients, which are hard to find, by the way, because most people don't maintain
Right.
weight
Yeah,
loss a
they're
long
right.
time. But I found them in the OptiFast program. They were 18 months out, having the same counseling, the same food. And all I did was take one group and do some reasonably minimal exercise. And 12 weeks later, I measured both groups. I measured their body composition. The group that just dieted, okay, lost lean muscle and lost a little bit of fat. The group that did a little bit of exercise, I'm not even talking about really high intensity because they were so afraid they were going to die when I had to get releases for the IRB, uh, just did a little bit of exercise, okay, kept losing fat, didn't lose muscle, okay, and their metabolic rate was higher, meaning they had now 100 calories more a day, okay, which after 12 weeks would be manifested at a higher level if you did it for continuously, okay. They had a higher metabolic rate. What does that mean? It means you could eat more, okay, you could and maintain your weight. The other people's metabolic rate declined, decreased. Some of these people that I've actually worked with, Tony, at 700 calories a day couldn't lose weight because their
Wow.
metabolic rate had slowed down and compensated for the lack of exercise, to put it simply.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that,
And
that it is
like,
crazy. That
I
ain't good.
mean,
Okay,
yeah,
and you know, and I know, as you're working with older people, and it doesn't have to be that old. You start to get sarcopenia, what you're starting to lose muscle. You know, most of the women know about osteopenia, which is the precursor to osteoporosis, bones, being really porous. Okay, well, the same thing happens to muscle. In fact, it happens at the same time. Okay, you've now got people that have sarcopenic, meaning loss of muscle diabetes. They're not even heavy. Loss of muscle, okay, um, uh, metabolic derangement, insulin resistance. Okay,
yep.
why? Because where does insulin work most manifestly? In the muscle cells. If you have developed your muscles to the point where they need to store this fight or flight energy, this glycogen, this sugar, then your bloodstream doesn't need to carry it around. These insulin receptors, these little keys and lock things, okay, will accept this glycogen, the sugar out of your blood, because they want to have this storage for an emergency. If you have bigger, deeper pools or reservoirs, you're going to have much less resistance to insulin. If you have less resistance to insulin, insulin is a hibernation hormone. It wants us to not use energy. We want it to be diminished. So we use the opposite on the seesaw. We have, um, uh, I'm sorry, glucagon, okay, which
Hmm.
means speed up, use energy, do stuff, be active. Okay, it allows that to run through our blood vessels. And so what we're trying to do is, if you think about it kind of simply, we want a youthful metabolic milieu, a youthful metabolic soup, good chemistry, vibrant chemistry, building cells and breaking them down when necessary, and not just the stagnation of effort. Okay, stagnation of metabolic and physiologic activity.
Cool. And it even seems like when you talk about SMART, it's, slow, maximum, response training. Um, okay, that's just 15 minutes twice per week. And I'll make sure to have some links to some of the videos that are on YouTube. So people who are interested in learning that, they'll have a way to see the work you're doing. Obviously, your book is a great place to start. The videos will be helpful, and I just want to make sure people have access to that. But having said that, on those other days, and speaking of milieu, right? What about stretching? What about other forms of like
Okay,
walking? And what's your thoughts on those
no,
modalities as well?
again, two separate and distinct issues: activity and exercise. This exercise is mandatory. In fact, I have this in the book. I have a little scale, I have a little chart. Twice a week, high intensity exercise, mandatory. Strongly suggested every day you are active. You walk, you move, you bike, you golf, you yoga, you stretch. Okay, now I think you should stretch every day. That's a separate and distinct discipline, because as we get older, there is definitely a decrease in range of motion unless we
Hmm.
maintain it. If you take a kid that's 4 years old, 3 years old, you put them on the floor, they're like a friggin' slinky. I mean, they can move all over the place. We train by having these kids sit and do and sit and stay and be stagnant. We train them to lose their innate flexibility. So what does that mean? It means that in order for you to get out of your car, in order for you to get up from a low sofa, get off the toilet, okay, it requires some muscle strength and it requires some range of motion, which we call flexibility. Okay, that and one of the benefits of the exercise that I do with my smart system is that it's full range. So it actually does stretch the muscle. Not to get again into the weeds, but a full contraction in the active muscle, the antagonist, the agonist, like the bicep, is actually the ultimate stretch for the tricep. and vice versa. That's why I do movements that are antagonistic. Okay, leg extensions, leg curls, or flexions. Okay, so we do get that mobility, but the actual stretching is one, it is relaxing. Two, it is beneficial, and three, it helps function. It's functionally more beneficial. And as you get older, I think you require stretching almost more importantly than when you're younger, even though it's well advised to try to maintain that flexibility that you're innately born with. But no, flexibility is real important. There are a lot of good signals that are relaxation signals, okay? Dopamine signals. There are a bunch of good, again, all the things that we do, all the stuff that we eat, all the drugs that we take, manufacture signals. Those signals drive into pathways. Those pathways manifest themselves at some level into being healthy or unhealthy. That's what we're really trying to do with all of these behaviors.
That's perfect. I actually had a guest, Alicia Archer. Her tag name on social media is Kinky Sweat, which is interesting tag name. Um, and that's being true to her heritage. So she has kinky hair,
Yeah.
but she's like literally could be with circus, with the
Cirque du
circus.
Soleil. Yeah,
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 yeah.
the whole nine. But she really emphasized stretching. And I'll be honest, I haven't made that my routine yet, and that's going to be part of what I do as I work
Tony,
towards
in my
the.
book, I have a whole section on stretching.
That's good to know
All right.
because I was going to literally ask you that question. So I think that's good to know because when you're kind of new to something, you want to figure out what's the best way to do it. So I'll definitely. I'm glad you said that because I
And those
hadn't.
are those are my stretches. This is, a 73-year-old guy. I do that. I stretch twice a day. I stretch in the morning.
Wow.
I stretch at night. Not long, 5, 6
Yeah.
minutes.
Right. Just
Basic,
something quick.
hamstring, low back, neck.
Right.
So, basic
Get the
stuff.
day
Nothing.
going, end the
Yeah,
day well. It's nothing like being flexible. So I'm really happy to know that that's in there. So I'm going to definitely check that out personally, and hopefully those who are checking this out will check it out too. When I look at you, and I see that Italian, side of you. I live in a town called Oak Park, Illinois,
yeah,
and it's a River Forest, Illinois, and it's a large Italian community. It's also Oak Park has just a ton of Italian restaurants. And before I started my low carb journey, and of course there's keto versions that we can come up with,
yeah,
I really missed the pasta. So it's kind of like the elephant in the room. So as you've adopted a low carb diet, and you have your cultural background, how have
yeah.
you been able to mesh those two?
Well, we had pasta. Okay, but I'm a full-blooded Italian, half Sicilian, half middle of Italy thing. But we had pasta on Thursdays and Sundays. Okay, but and my parents were lean. My mom ate pasta maybe 4 or 5 times a week, but she didn't eat a lot of pasta, and she had
Mm-hmm.
it with fish, with
Mm.
beans, with vegetables. Okay. Now I'm a big eater. I've been a big eater for my entire life, apparently. Um, so I don't eat pasta much at all. Once in a while, maybe, probably, honestly, a couple times a year if there's a special event. Because
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I'm never going to eat pasta again in my life, but I try to minimize it. But I make, and my wife makes a lot of the conventional, traditional pasta dishes without pasta. So my wife will go into a restaurant and order a pasta dish that has chicken and vegetables and this stuff on it. And she
Mm-hmm.
goes, just hold the pasta, double me up
Wow.
on the double up on the stuff, right? The chicken, the vegetable.
Right.
Okay, what do I make? I make chicken parm. Okay, I make my own chicken parm, off the charts. Mozzarella cheese, chicken, tomato sauce, spicy. Come on, in garlic and olive oil. I mean, this stuff is phenomenal. Okay, I have,
It is good stuff.
I
Huh.
mean, you can do all of this
I
kind of
hadn't
stuff.
done that. Dr. Ben, I hadn't even thought to do that. That's a logical thing to do. I'm usually looking for substitutes. Do you have any spinach? And I'll just do, but I never thought just hold the pasta.
Yeah, I mean, she does it, and they pile on all, the chicken and the veggies. I mean, I do sausage, peppers, and onions. Okay, you know, it's
And
peppers and
it's
onions. That's my
delicious.
deal.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have that. You don't need bread. You know what I mean? Sometimes in my book I say if you really need a bread substitute, low carb, They have these low carb tortillas, Tony. You can make pizza on them. You can make
Hmm.
wraps. You can make sandwiches. Two
That's right.
two net grams of carb, and you can fill that sucker up with whatever you want to eat, meat
That's
wise
right.
and sauce wise and vegetable. I mean, it's awesome. So no, you again. Remember, I said this takes organization. One thing I have to say about eating, and I know a little bit about eating. Trust me, okay, is that you have to be organized. I know what I'm going to eat tonight, tomorrow,
Hmm.
and if I'm going to a restaurant, I know what I'm going to order. If you leave it up to the moment and to the
Right.
smells and the tastes, you're
That's
more
right.
likely to screw up. Be organized and make it good stuff. Tuna salad, shrimp salad, chicken salad. Come on, turkey salad. These things, are you kidding me? That stuff's delicious. Celery, some onion, whatever. Come on. You can do this stuff. And it's good. Listen, I'm a food guy. Trust me. I mean, I eat a lot of food. Even at my age, people are like Charlie said, Barkley said, he says, I never seen a guy eat so much in my life and still be lean.
Right.
But
How do you pull
it's
it off,
what
right?
you eat. It has a lot to do with what you eat, but what you eat has a lot to do with how you prepare. So when you come home and you're tired and you're cranky and you need a reward, you don't reach in, and grab a bag of chips. You reach in. I got some turkey salad right in my refrigerator right now, about a pound and a half of it. I want to munch on something? I munch on turkey salad. Okay, I got cheese in there, stuff like that. There's so many nice, and my wife's a techie, or she wrote this maybe 50, 60 pages of that book where we have buy 5, 10, 15 and gram carbohydrate foods and portions. There's probably 400, 500 things in there that are under 15 grams of carb. Okay. Come on.
Right.
Yeah. Get organized. That's my,
There's no sacrifice. I mean, even
no.
if I'm traveling to all inclusive, there's so much food. It's easy to do this. And
Yep.
again, these little tips that you shared, is the type of stuff, practical stuff that people need to hear, so they can, when they're out in that moment, they kind of know how to manage, when they're out there. So I think that really helps. And I do want to just ask one question related to low carb. And I try to be flexible. I'm getting a master's in nutrition. There's
Great.
a lean towards more plant-based in that in world, but with the foundation that I have, I'm able to articulate a different vision, and they hear it. The good news is, when you talk to people in class, if you talk to people, the professors, they do understand the benefits of low carb. They may be a little biased towards grains, a little biased towards you got to have all the
Yeah.
different
The
colors and all of that stuff. But
micronutrients.
ultimately, yeah. So it is what it is. But my question is, what's been your experience about? Because there are some people who tolerate my carnivores. Some of them just can't tolerate plants, period. Then
Yeah.
I have people who are, maybe they just don't tolerate meat.
Yeah.
So
No, I
what's your
got,
thoughts on? Yeah, what's your thoughts on that, just
well,
globally?
again, one size does not fit all. Okay. And bottom line is, if your labs are good, if you feel good, and you're lean as you want to be, and you're satisfied, I guess I wouldn't give you any advice at all. I'd say maybe these are things you might want to look into for the future.
Right.
Okay. But I mean, what do you need us for? Okay. But most people most of the time would do well in reducing carbohydrate because it has a cumulative negative effect on our health. Okay, but as far as whether it's vegan or animal, I mean, a couple of things. Protein is, I think you're going to see more and more of this, even with the guys that resisted me in the last few years, even in our
Hmm.
community. Protein is way important, Tony. Okay,
Yeah,
I mean, I think you could do really well with protein and a little bit of energy food, whether
that's
it be
right.
fat or carb, but it's much easier to control carb, I think, okay, behaviorally.
It's coming around because many of my listeners know I write a monthly column with the Diet Doctor, but I also can share that they have an entire high protein
Yeah,
section now,
no.
like where
Yeah,
they yeah
Andreas got on board with this. Yes,
yeah.
because he did his own experiment, okay? And
Oh, so that's
Tony, I've been doing this stuff. The best results I got with obese people were protein sparing modified fast. I have to tell you that. I talked to Peter Attia about this years ago,
mhm.
and he said off the record, and I said, tell you the truth, if you really want to drop weight, protein sparing modified fast. I'll be honest with you, okay?
Yep.
Uh, and so you're like down to zero carbs. But in any case, um, a couple of things just objectively, and I couldn't care less if you had alfalfa sprouts or you know bull testicles. I don't give it. I couldn't care what you eat, okay, personally. But the protein array, the protein formulation in meat, and flesh food is much more reasonable, much more accountable towards what our needs are with regard to amino acids. And the amino acids in meat as opposed to vegetables, okay, is much more bioavailable. So it stands to reason that it's a hell of a lot easier, I think, to eat, an animal-based diet as opposed to a plant-based diet. It's just more efficient. And if you're eating a plant-based diet, to tell you the truth, you're going to have to eat like a cow. I mean, you're going to have to get a lot
Mm-hmm.
of stuff to get the actual end product amount of nutrients and protein, okay, that you can get from, a cheeseburger without the bun. I mean, so and that's a tough concept. It's a
Right.
tough
Well,
concept.
and it's harder because of the anti-nutrients and the oxalates and the phytates.
Yeah, yeah,
So you got the volume issue, the enough calories to make it work, and then you got stuff in the plants that's going to fight you. So it's very hard to compare that to something that's more bioavailable, and
yeah.
that's that steak that you could have ate. So no question.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not me or you, believing it like faith, belief without understanding. This is the reality. This is what
That's what
happens
I'm
to people.
learning even in a plant leaning nutrition master's program.
Right.
I'm learning that in that program.
Yeah.
So that's you have to be honest with science. And if my professors who may lean in that direction can look me in my face and say, by the way, this protein is more bioavailable and you're going to get way more iron and all these other things out of that, then you can't argue with that. So that's why it's important. And that's why we want to be able to have these conversations, and as scientists, and we're not arguing, and I never will ever say low carb or the highway. What I'm saying is,
Yeah.
let's not demonize meat. Let's not demonize keto when we have scientific evidence to support that it's a great option for those who choose that.
Well, the problem with this stuff, Tony, in my experience, I did my second doctorate and I really went into, and then I met Gary Taubes years later. But a lot of the references he used in Good Calories, Bad Calories were guys that I talked to and studied, 15 years before that, 20 years before that. And this stuff is pretty much known, but we were indoctrinated to thinking that carbohydrates were fine in any form and fats were bad. I mean, the literature all went
Mm-hmm.
there, and I mean, some really smart guys believe this. Okay, but the problem
Mm-hmm.
was association. Okay, the problem was association. It wasn't chemistry. It wasn't physiology. It was, well, the people who eat a lot of meat, the people who eat a lot of steak have more heart attacks. Well, the people who went to college have fewer heart attacks. Now, you're telling me when you walk through that gate in college that made you healthier? That's ridiculous. I mean, there's
Right,
no there's
right.
no nuance to that.
That's
That's
right.
just stupid. Okay, simple as that. So when you started to look at how they diagnosed what they considered evidence, we realized that they were not really good detectives. In fact, they didn't know their ass from their elbow. All right. So that's
Right.
my read on that
Yeah.
stuff, Tom.
Well, and I always share with patients, whether it's with the Public Health Collaborative or other sources, I say, here's the science. And the science is pretty clear when you do randomized controlled trials. So it's just nice to know that I wouldn't, as a clinician, I can advise patients based on something that's not evidence based. And that's one of the things I like about Diet Doctor and Dr. Brett Scher and his team.
Yeah.
Uh, they really try to stick with science, and they're very respectful of other
Yeah.
views, and it's not my way or the highway. It's just that here's something that can help people, and that's why he was open. As I think about it, that's why he was open to this whole protein ideal, I'm sure, because he's open to hearing a new approach, a different way of doing things, a different, and once you get enough evidence to support that, let's do it. So and that'll serve another group of people who really want to emphasize protein. I'm a steak guy, so that's a dietary approach that kind of suits my particular needs. So
Hmm.
I love all of that, Dr. Ben. And so let me ask you about my nest and rope acronym. And I just want you to, as you think about your own journey, and I know you're doing well with a lot of these things, but nutrition, exercise, less stress, more sleep, how we think, avoiding trauma, making sure our relationships are healthy, avoiding organisms and pollutants. And by the way, as a commercial, I'll be interviewing one of the guy who used to be the president of the College of Allergy. In fact, he was the first African American president of the College of Allergy, Dr. Fogg, and he just happens to be. And he'll be here to talk about pollutants and how it impacts asthma and things of that nature. That'll be my next episode
That's
to
cool.
follow yours. And then, of course, E for life experiences and emotions, making sure that we protect our life experiences, make sure our emotions are protected. So when you think about your journey, for the next 12 months or so, are there areas that you're really going to give extra attention so you can achieve your ideal state?
You know, I've been pretty lucky, Tony, that the lifestyle that I've chosen is rewarding and kind of, fun. I like it. I enjoy. I mean, I'm an older guy. I get up in the morning, and I'll tell you what, I'm pretty happy. I said, this is cool. This stuff is good, and maybe I'm just delusional or something. But it seems like, but I think I'm grateful. I mean, I know I'm lucky. It's not like I'm
Yeah.
cognizant of the fact that I'm lucky. Okay,
Yeah.
but it doesn't diminish my happiness. That what I'm saying. Well, I'm not going to say I feel bad because I'm lucky. I mean,
Right.
don't. I don't. I'm sorry. Now, try to help people that need help. Absolutely. Can't see why you wouldn't want to do that. Try to
Hmm.
spread what you think is a good word. Try not to be a proselytizing zealot. Yeah, those are things
Yeah.
that I don't that turn me off completely. But I think I do good stuff. I don't bother people. I try not to bother people unless they bother me first. Then I'm Italian and I'll bother them pretty good.
Ah.
But, but I mean, so I think, kind of live and let live. But like, there's not a day that goes by, Tony, when I don't go somewhere and I'm 70, I'm going to be 73. People look at me and go, wow, you're in great shape. Wow, you look really healthy. And then I just start to tell them a little bit about what goes on. And
Hmm.
you'd be surprised how in a grocery store, in a dry cleaners, people gather around and want to hear this
Mm.
stuff. So you know how reinforcing that is? I
Oh,
mean, people want to hear what I say. That's crazy. To me, it's
well,
like, well, am I in friggin' Oz or what? I mean, so I can't say. I mean, I like doing what I do. I like reading. I like learning. I like teaching. I like helping. I like being a model for what I propose and what I put forth as being a way to live. I like to live the life. So I'm lucky, man. I mean,
yeah. Well,
you know,
you did get lucky in a way, and some people would say blessed because you
yeah,
were
whatever.
surrounded by the right. You were just a seed, and somebody put a little fertilizer on you, and somebody put a little sunlight on you, and somebody poured a little water on you, and then you were fed the right stuff, and then as you grew, you became curious and you wanted to do better and be better, and you were true to your purpose. And when people were trying to push you in a different direction, you said, no, I'm going in this direction
Yeah,
because
oh,
it's
absolutely.
I mean, I just think all of that. So I just thank God you did that. And you're the first guest when I asked about the nest and the rope who really said, you know what, I'm doing those things pretty good. And I just and that's a good place to be. So and I just hope everybody listening, who particularly for those who are thinking about their longevity and want to be here for a while, let Dr. Ben be a role model for you. This is not a fantasy. He's not an outlier. He's just a guy who just saw a path and cared about himself enough, and now he's trying to help us. So I really appreciate that. So as we
Yeah.
wrap up, I
Well,
know you
Tony,
and
I got one thing to say. My father told me one time. He said, to be a good human being, you want to leave every relationship and every place you go a little better than you found it.
yeah,
He said, if you could do that, you lived a good life. And so think about it that it's simple, right? I mean, add a little bit of something. You don't have to be a superstar or something, but make everything that you encounter a little bit better for you having encountered it. And that to me, he said to me, that's a successful life.
That's a wonderful way of looking at life. I agree 100%, and that's just a nice way to think about life and how you can impact the world. So I appreciate that. I'll definitely hold on to those thoughts myself. So as we wrap up, Dr. Ben, I know you talked about, there's, three ways to do these exercises. You can have bands at home. You can have, and this is stuff we talked about in our separate video. You said you can have a total gym, and you can maybe go to a gym. So when people want to get this information, I just want to wrap up with this. Obviously, you have your book, which
Mm-hmm.
we love, and with your nice your body on the other side. I got to show that again.
Oh
And
God.
then, but so besides the book, I think we talked about videos we're gonna have a link to some of them. Low Carb USA
Yeah, Low
has some
Carb
of the
USA has
videos.
a lot of good videos. I have apparently I'm on YouTube, Dr. Benbow, DRBENBO. Uh, People can get a hold of me. I mean, I think on that my email and even my phone number. I mean, I try to answer all the people personally, and I talk. People say, "Wow, you're real! I can't believe you actually answered the phone." I said, "If I'm not busy, if I'm busy, I don't answer the phone. If I'm not, I'll answer the phone."
Yeah,
Like I spoke to somebody yesterday who was a Baptist minister who just loved the thing I did. I did a thing with Sean Baker yesterday. He just loved it, and he was so appreciative. I sent him a book. He's a good guy,
yeah.
whatever. So yeah, you do the best you can, and I'm accessible. My stuff is accessible. Most of it's free. I mean, my book cost a couple of bucks, but what the, and that's it. I mean,
Well, that's it. And so again, I thank you for the opportunity. And I think a lot of people will be inspired to, again, spend 15 minutes twice a week. It's just not asking. And then when you're taking that walk, hold that hand of that significant other, stretch that body. All of that stuff's going to be good. So I really appreciate you spending time with me. And I'm looking forward to seeing you for
yeah, that I
those
am
who
too, Tone.
we're gonna see
I'm
each
really
other at
looking
Low
forward.
Carb USA in
Yep.
San Diego. So that's going to be a great
Oh, by the
opportunity.
way, uh, Doug said if they want to apply, if they want to go and see it or remotely see it or go to if they use NEST, they get a 20% discount.
Thank you for mentioning
Yeah,
that, and
yeah,
I really appreciate that. So use the NEST, guys. That acronym is going to help us in many ways, and let's thank you for getting that message out, because we definitely want people to check it out. And it's a very, very affordable opportunity. And if you can't go, just do it virtually, and it's very affordable. 4 days of experts talking
yeah.
about this
Real,
type
real
of
good
stuff.
lineup.
Good lineup. So
Yeah,
thank you again, and I appreciate you, and enjoy the rest of your day. And as I wrap up, guys, today was a very important day, because today we've been given the opportunity of resurrecting our goal of exercising. Even before this podcast, you knew that exercise was important, but life just happens, right? So instead of allowing life to just happen to you, it's time to take control of your life and try something that each and every one of us can do. And that's to find 15 minutes 2 times per week to do something that will not only help us to feel better, but as Dr. Ben has suggested, will add many years to our lives. So, more time with our families, friends, coworkers, and of course, more time to live our life purpose. And because I love my family, and especially my wife so much, I am planning to try Dr. Ben's approach, and I am hoping you will too. So don't use this podcast as simple entertainment, but instead as a tool that you can walk away from each week and inspired to change, to just be better than you were the week before. And if you decide to try Dr. Ben's program, make sure to share any successes you're having in the comments, and you may inspire somebody if you do. So I really thank all of you guys for joining me today, and Dr. Ben, and I appreciate you. And I only ask that you continue to be safe, be well, and to continue to protect your nest. And again, thank you again, Dr. Ben.
my pleasure. You guys all stay well.